Tonight, President Akufo-Addo expresses grave concern about the country's ability to cope should there be a spike in coronavirus infections as he meets industry executives to solicit their help in the national fight against the virus.
But were there to be a surge, we have not got there yet, but were there to be a surge in the incidence of this pandemic in Ghana, we would all unfortunately discover that we are very naked to deal with it.
In this highly fluid developing story, we have the latest for you here on Top Story, as Leadership of Parliament has meanwhile been meeting with the President as the House prepares to consider emergency legislation following the President's announcement of a partial shutdown. We've just literally been hearing in the last few seconds that emergency legislation may be heard tonight. Stay with us.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success and passion. Also brought to you by Gasem Cement, the nation builder, and Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready. Tonight there are several developments to report about Ghana's fight to win the war against the coronavirus following confirmation of 6 cases. The official figure still, as of tonight, stands at 6. And we still await the latest updates from health officials. But tonight we start from the presidency, where President Akufo-Addo has been meeting with industry executives in an attempt to form a broader coalition in the war against the virus. Now, opening that meeting, the president expressed grave concern about Ghana's ability to cope if there is a spike in infection numbers locally.
And sometimes it takes bad situations or crises to reveal the obvious truth. Our country, our economy, our society is too dependent on foreign-made things across the board. We're not just talking pharmaceuticals, we're talking industry. Across the board of our national life, we are far too dependent on things that are made from abroad and are imported by us for use. We should be making most of the things that we use in Ghana ourselves. And I'm seeing what is happening to us in this crisis as an opportunity. It has very big consequences, but it is also an opportunity. They say necessity is the mother of invention, and advisedly so. As we are now, in all of the areas which we need to mobilize to confront this pandemic, especially, we all pray that the measures that are being put in place will prevent that. But were there to be a surge, we have not got there yet, but were there to be a surge in the incidence of this pandemic in Ghana, we would all unfortunately discover that we are very naked to deal with it. So, I called you here for all of us to put our brains and minds and hearts together to see a way forward for the future of our country. Whatever decisions are made today are not going to transform the situation today or even tomorrow. But then we are then going to be putting in the building blocks, the platform for the transformation of tomorrow. And I felt that you, the leaders of the pharmaceutical industry in our country, together with some of the leading bankers here, the regulators of the industry, officials of government, and we can come together in this coalition, we can then begin to address these deficiencies in a really systematic and programmatic manner.
And that is the president meeting with the executives from industry. Shortly, I'll be taking you to Parliament, where they've just finished a meeting with the president considering the emergency legislation. I'll also be taking you shortly to the Information Ministry for the very latest on this developing story. But I want to take you live now to the Presidency Jubilee House, where my colleague Elton Brobe sat through this meeting with industry executives, and he joins me on the telephone line right now. And Elton, we're also learning from the president today that there are already discussions to see how the Bank of Ghana can support industry to produce what we need to win the war against Corona.
Yes, Evans, and indeed the governor of the central bank was part of this meeting. We are privileged to be part of the introductory part, after which they went into a closed-door session where the issues that the president had before walking into the meeting were discussed, per my information that we got after. Now, the presence of the governor of the Bank of Ghana, I'm sure, had to deal with the fact that government is looking at making money or funds available for some of these pharmaceutical companies who want to go into the production of some of the essential things we need as far as, dealing with this virus is concerned. So the president was quite emphatic that he is still not happy with our interest rate, the interest banks charge on loans, given to companies, and something must be done about it. And the directive to the governor of the Bank of Ghana was that there should be that consideration in view of the fact that we are not in normal times, and that the financial institutions can make money available for some of these pharmaceutical companies to go into. Even before the meeting will get underway, I got a word from some of the players in the pharmaceutical industry, and their main issue has to do with lack of funding. And they told me before going to the meeting that if the government is able to resolve them 100%, they'll be more than willing to do what the government expects of them in terms of producing to meet the demands of the general public, especially in this time where panic appears to be the order of the day.
And the president himself lays before these captains of industry the list of things we need now that he expects them to go into production as soon as possible. Listen to him.
The governor and some of the bankers know my constant refrain about the difficulties it is for people to have access to money in Ghana, rates of interest that are necessarily high in my view, and that there is a need for all of us to work collectively to see how our banking sector, which fortunately under his leadership is becoming stronger and stronger, can find a way of channeling monies and resources to some of you here, so that you can begin to do things for our health system here. There's a whole range of things that come into play when a crisis of this nature occurs. And the simplest and obvious things, gloves, sanitizers, pads, this, that, you can think of a whole range of things. It would make for a great deal of interest to see in the whole range of things that are involved, how many of those things are made in Ghana and in what quantities that they are made. We can't continue like that. We can't continue if we want to be a properly functioning country. We can't continue to live off other people's ingenuity and hard work. We have to live off our own ingenuity and creativity and hard work. That's the only way we can build a viable nation. So I'm saying to you, and it's something that I will be saying a lot during this crisis, that it provides us with an opportunity. And not just to wring our hands and say, oh God, how frightening is this phenomenon that has emerged? What are we going to do about it? Yes, it's frightening, don't take care, it can even lead to panic, but we are determined to overcome it, and some of the measures that have to be taken are conversations like what I want to have this afternoon.
Well, following that, the Bank of Ghana has issued a statement. We have more for you if you join us on Newsnight on that. But Elton is still with me on the telephone line. Elton, there's some possible chatter coming out of the captains of industry and the pharmaceutical association in particular, particularly about the hand sanitizers, etc., that we know are in short supply and people are selling at exorbitant prices. We are getting word that after this meeting, there is an agreement for it to produce in quantities locally and fast.
Yes, Evans, and indeed, this is what the president of the Pharmaceuticals Association told me, Mr. Kofi Nsia Opoku. Now, at this meeting also was representatives from the Food and Drugs Authority. Now, according to Mr. Nsia Opoku, they have the capacity. They may lack the financial resources to pull it through. But what is critical now is for the Food and Drugs Authority to grant them the approval and the license to go into the production of hand sanitizers. Once the FDA is able to provide them with this instrument, they can assure the president that within this week they can flood the market with hand sanitizers made in Ghana by pharmaceutical companies here in Ghana. We can listen to Mr. Njabuku.
We try to find ways where the pharmaceutical manufacturers will make products available for treatment. As at now, there's no cure, and there's only prevention and supportive treatment. With regards to prevention, where we need hand sanitizers and nose masks, etc., we are making sure they are easily available. We know that sanitizers have become scarce. We've developed a basic formula where we are trying to sort out with FDA to make sure that many pharmacies can make it so that it is easily available at the right price. We have seen that sanitizers that are even 4 cedis are now being sold around 30 to 50 cedis. So we want every local to be able to buy. So we have that in place. With regard to the supportive treatment, we are also prepared. We have the machines and the lines to be able to do that. I have asked manufacturers to put aside their normal production schedules and bring up products that will be used to support the COVID-19, so that we make sure that those products are also easily available, which we are doing. Fortunately, the president wants us to even move further to make sure that the pharmaceutical industry is more resourced. More companies come up, more factories are also built, so that in future we can be self-sufficient and even export to the neighboring countries who are not really strong as we are. And a small group has now been formed for us to meet and deliberate and go into details as to the modalities for the implementation of this discussion.
And as you may well know, as of today, the president has yesterday announced a complete ban on all gatherings, including schools have been suspended across the board from basic to tertiary. All that is in force. Funerals can only be limited to 15 people, and the raft of new measures that the president announced yesterday. Now, today, the president yesterday also asked Parliament's assistance in getting the legislation necessary to back these emergency measures that he announced in the national address yesterday. My colleague Joseph Gakpo is joining me now from Parliament with the latest on this particular angle to this story. Joseph, do we know what happened when the leaders in Parliament met the president?
We gather that meeting lasted for close to an hour. We gather that the main issue that was on the agenda for discussion has to do with this legislation that's supposed to come to Parliament in order to get the necessary approval to back the measures that the president actually announced. And this is the legislation that we gather is being put together at the Office of the Attorney General, and it's actually being put together with the backing of Article 2140 of the Constitution, which actually gives the executive arm of government, and particularly the president, sweeping powers when it comes to issues having to do with emergencies. And so a while ago, just about 15 minutes ago, Parliament resumed sitting. Now what happened was that the House had been sitting all morning, sometime around 2 o'clock. The Speaker, it wasn't the Speaker, then the Speaker had gotten up, but then the second Deputy Speaker suspended sitting of the House and indicated that the leadership needed to go meet the President and that they would return around 4:30 for a sitting. About 15 minutes ago, that sitting resumed in Parliament, and the majority leader, Evans Mensah, indicated to MPs that that meeting had actually come to a close, and indicated that following that, they are expecting some legislation, and to quote him, that is on its way to Parliament. If it arrives today, they'll go ahead and begin work on it. Otherwise, any other time that it gets to the House, they'll go ahead and work on it. He was responding to a question from Second Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Alban Dagbin, who is actually presiding over sitting as we speak.
We have to get back to business, and I'll ask the majority leader for guidance. Speaker, as you're aware, we have to take a suspension. Therefore, the leadership to have a meeting with the president. The meeting is over. Of course, we also needed some time to refill. So we are here to continue the corporate insolvency bill. We have indications that some papers are migrating towards Parliament. If they do come, we take them. But if they don't, we deal with this. What is before us? An appropriate time, we take an adjournment.
This was a short while ago, Joseph. Do we have any certainty if this emergency legislation will in fact come before the House tonight for an emergency consideration and approval?
Not yet. The House has actually resumed other businesses relating to the corporate insolvency bill, and the necessary amendments are actually being made. We don't have that certain indication that it would arrive tonight, but the indication is that when it arrives, it will be referred to the appropriate committees, most likely the Constitution and Legal Affairs Committee, and then the committee will do a consideration of it, come back with a report indicating that it possibly meets the status of something that should be passed under a certificate of urgency, and subsequently show up with a report on that, and then the necessary amendments will be done. And the expectation is that possibly within days, the said document would eventually be approved so that then government can go ahead and roll out the measures to contain the situation.
Yeah, Joseph, thank you very much. So the key question to ask tonight, as we all begin to come to terms with the new norm now, society as we know it is changing, is in the absence of the legislation, can the measures that the president announced yesterday be enforceable, for example? It's a key question that we're trying to unpack for you tonight. We are getting some additional clarity from the information minister, who just, in fact, is given an address, we understand, on some of the key issues in partnering the media. We'll bring that to you shortly, but listen to Opon Krumah explain the issues surrounding the legislation and when it might actually go to Parliament.
Announcement that will be by the state that require an executive instrument, not an airline, not a new law. That was the minister, I think, as of now, has done it already. It's an executive instrument. And then there are some parts that require amendments of some legislations in Parliament that the Attorney General, as directed by the President, is heading to very quickly do that. I think if my brief is correct, by tomorrow we should begin to see signs of it in Parliament. Indeed, today the leadership of Parliament is meeting the President on whatever needs to be done in that case to ensure that in instances where persons decide not to comply, the necessary sanctions can be brought to bear. You also understand now why there needed to be about a 48-hour period for some of the sanctions that were made, or some of the protocols to kick in, because it's important to structure the whole system to be able to implement it. And so that is where we are now. Dr. Yankson, and then I'll invite...
So that's upon Nkrumah addressing the press just a short while ago. I guess for many Ghanaians tonight, what you want to know is, and of course we are affected by this, is what is happening with the contact tracing that is happening following the confirmation of 6 cases. Are there additional tests happening? What are the results? Well, the information ministry sources tell us that as of now they do not have any updates on that front. Immediately they do, we should get it for you in terms of the tests that are still being carried out tonight, and what the health officials are trying to confirm, as many boots are currently on the ground, is still out there looking for individuals who may have come in contact with these 6 cases that we head off. Thankfully, Mr. Nkrumah is joining us on the telephone line right now. We can get some further clarity on this. Mr. Nkrumah, thank you for your time here on Top Story. Can you, if you may, are there any updates to give the public, especially with the 6 cases? And we knew yesterday you announced contact tracing is happening. Have we found more? Is testing happening? And when can we get further updates?
Evans, I'll be disappointing you, but I don't have any new developments to share with you on this matter. We just completed a meeting with the Ghana Journalists Association, Independent Broadcasters Association, and Primpag on media reportage protocols that we can also assist the media with. But I don't have any fresh details on the 6 cases that were announced.
Okay, we'll wait for that. And a quick one on the measures that were announced yesterday. 2 quick questions on that. One is about enforcement. Are we clear yet how these will be enforced?
Yes, the legal backing that is required, it is my understanding, are in 2 forms. The first is an executive instrument by the minister responsible for health under the Public Health Act to declare a state of health emergency or a public health emergency. I think that's the expression in the law, Section 261 of Act 851, if I'm correct. Public health emergency, which he is expected to do today. I can validate for you, but it should be in place by now. And the second is for the Attorney General to go to Parliament with legislation, also to ensure that the necessary sanctions for persons who may not comply can be articulated. My understanding is that I think by tomorrow she should be notifying Parliament how that will happen.
So what it means is the legislation that will go to Parliament will spell out exactly how this is going to be implemented, enforced, and then the sanctions that will apply to those who violate the measures that the President announced yesterday.
That is my expectation. But even as at now, like the President said, these are not ordinary times. And it is good to note the level of compliance that people are already even putting up.
I mean, I need to ask you this. I mean, I guess in these times, everybody's learning as we go along. There's a talk about because this is an emergency situation, as we are hearing, emergency legislation. Would it be required for the streets to be flooded with police, possibly military helping to enforce this? Is that a conversation that is being had at all?
I would want the draft to be laid before Parliament, and then we can all now have a conversation on the specifics, so that we don't speculate on the nature of that legislation.
Mr. Nkrumah, thank you very much. We'll wait for the details as of course this begin to play out. But let me bring in Maxwell Opoku Ajimanizi. Is a lawyer par excellence, is a constitutional brain to help us unpack this part of the Constitution that has been activated by the President yesterday with the national address. Thank you, Ms. Ajman, for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you very much.
Please help us appreciate this. So I just finished talking to Mr. Nkrumah. The legislation is still on its way to Parliament. In terms of its enforcement, he says we should wait for the legislation to spell it out. Does that suggest then that the announcement that was made yesterday, the strict bans that the President announced, as of tonight, it's not enforceable?
Well, it seems you need to find out which is enforceable and which is not enforceable. You have to differentiate between institutions such as schools being asked to close and then things like that, which are administrative. Maybe we are talking about a restriction on fundamental human rights like the movement of persons, which is in Article 21. That is where maybe you are you think
exactly, because exactly what the president said, all gatherings have henceforth been suspended, and he names them churches. I mean, those will come, and I guess that's where I'm asking.
Yes, because that's where. But as you are aware, Article 21 refers to laws that are necessarily required for public health, public good, national security, and things like that. And I believe that is why Act 851, which is the Public Health Act 2012, Act 851 comes into handy. In my view, I heard the minister maybe thinking about, I don't know, the amendment, if the amendment is in relation with penalty units, because when you take that Act 851, but let me say this, there are two ways by which this matter could be handled. The other one will be declaring a state of emergency under Article 31, and that one requires the president declaring the state of emergency and then putting it before Parliament after consultation with the Council of State, put it before Parliament, and then Parliament will consider it if within 72 hours, and it takes 6 months, after which it expires and can be renewed. That is Article 31. But as I listened to the president did not go to the route of Article 31, which means he rather went with Article 21, dealing with restrictions necessarily required for public health and public good. Once that happens, the laws necessarily required is Act 851, which is the Public Health Act. And the Public Health Act, if you look at Section 1 and Section 2, it deals with the declaration of communicable disease and infectious disease situations. And it explains what these are. So if people want to, there are certain things that you have to find. And then 169, that section, then provides for declaration of emergency health emergency health situation. That is 169. And 169 is done with an executive instrument. Even determining whether this is a communicable or infectious disease under Section 1 also requires an executive instrument. Then once you declare that this disease is a communicable one, then you go with an executive instrument, and the executive instrument can only be issued if that situation either has caused death or had a likelihood or probability of causing death. And then you can declare by executive instrument. And then there are offenses. There are offenses in the law, just that you don't have the penalty units, but I believe that we can apply the penalty units as in the interpretation as to deal with it. And then it provides also for collaboration, those institutions that are required. You see, this is done by the Minister for Health. But let me say that the Minister for Health deals with Ghana Health Service. And the Ghana Health Service, that is the municipal and district health officers, are under the Ministry of Health. But environmental sanitation or environmental health officers are not under Ministry of Health. They are under, they used to be under local government, but now they are under the Water and Sanitation Ministry. So the law requires a collaboration, and it also provides for collaboration with NAGMO. So all these institutions that are needed to enforce some of these things are laid out. Okay. And then things that can be done, including immunity and indemnification of officers who would exercise good faith, maybe quarantine people and things like that. These are all. So I believe that this EI can capture all those things that have been listed in the law, and then it becomes an executive instrument that will be.
I see. So I guess your point you're making that as of tonight, if churches are complying, they are doing that because out of goodwill. There's no legal injunction for them to do so now until this goes through Parliament and has been passed. Is that what it is?
Well, if you see fire and you decide to jump into it because there's no law preventing you to jump into fire, I think sometimes applying law to some or thinking about law in an absurd terms when survival of a human being is at stake. Sometimes that's why all over sometimes you find the head of states of those countries making a proclamation after which a legal instrument is laid. It would have been better if they were done at the same time. But as you know, sometimes when it comes to these emergency situations, proactiveness is very important. When you have such situations, sometimes strict legalities may not be prudent. To say that, well, I'll go to church because there's no EI yet, and then when you contract the virus, I think that it will not inure to your own benefit.
Okay.
So yes, with that, yes, but the EI, this executive instrument, which is not an airline, I think we have to differentiate the two, and therefore it will not require that stringent procedure like in an
to
airline.
Get it passed.
Yes.
I'm grateful that you joined us with that clarity. Maxwell Opoku-Agyeman, more on the coronavirus pandemic and the Ghana's own efforts of trying to bring it under control. And on Newsnight, which starts right now, MFA.
And in this edition, students of the University of Ghana